Okay. Well, hello, Paradigm Shifters. Woohoo! So grateful that you joined us. Paradigm Shifters, we are a group of people dedicated to uplifting the planet. How's that for you? Yes. And as of this morning, as we speak, you want to know a number, Laura? How many people are in here now?
Give it to me. Last I heard it was over six.
It's 694 people.
Ooh, we're just
And
ahead.
yeah,
Six
oh,
more.
that's
Come
far.
on. Come
Right?
on.
It's like, Laura, bring them in, right?
While
And
on my show, we're going to go over 700. That's it.
no, we know fly high living. So I am so excited and privileged to bring to you my buddy, right? My
Long
right
time friend.
and friend, longtime friend, Laura Meeks. I want to tell you a little bit about when I first met Laura. Uh-oh, right? We were sitting at a training in Los Angeles, huge ballroom and everything. I usually sit up front because I'm kind of short, right? And I hear this booming voice from the back. And I turn and there was this tall, beautiful woman and just glowing in her bright colors. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never heard a voice like that. I need to meet her. So I think at lunch we sat next to each other and you
The
told me
pizza
about,
place. Do you remember the pizza place?
oh, and yeah, then we had pizza
Yeah.
and it's been a friendship. We cut up and everything. But let me tell you some of the behind the scenes. Um, let's see, where did I put it? I have a little bio here that I did for you. See? Oh, where
I
did I put
deny
it?
it all.
Okay, here we go. I got it. Okay, so let's take a deep breath in,
Mhm.
and welcome Laura Meeks. So, diversity training is an important part of business culture, and many states now require this training. So, Laura brings her unique perspective. Listen to this. As a person who has lived as a male career military officer and pilot, as well as a successful businesswoman and coach. Now, if anyone can answer your questions on diversity, she can. And we'll have a fun time talking about it. Okay, so with that, today's topic is trusting your truth.
Truth.
Yeah, and I would love to turn this over to you, Laura, and trusting your truth. And I would love to have you bring us in a moment of time where you first trusted your truth and tell us your story. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, and I welcome everybody who's here live. It takes a little extra to get here and to be with us live, and it's never is it better live, other than if we could all be together. Typically, this sort of thing occurs when we're around our table of 10 with Mary and talking about, so how did you grow up? It's like, oh, let me tell you a story. And then it's like, oh my God, this is interesting. And Judy, I appreciate you bringing me into paradigm shifters because I do represent a certain paradigm shift. Um, as Judy said, I spent first 50 years of my life as a male, and my wife Annie, and I were both career military, so both of us retired from the United States Air Force. I spent my career flying in B-52 bombers, and I have a unique qualification. I was a navigator, a bombardier, a co-pilot, and a pilot. So of the six people that are in a B-52, I have spent I was qualified in four of those six seats. So given a lot of sticks, I could probably fly this whole thing by myself. So that was kind of a unique thing. But then there was an interesting challenge that came our way, and I'm going to kind of start this idea because Judy's told me we've got about 30 minutes to tell this story.
Sure, whatever you want, go for it.
Okay, so and then I'll open it up to questions because I think it really what I want to talk about is trusting your truth. How do you know who you are? So imagine some of you are old enough to have grandbabies. Little grandbaby shows up in the world and they're this little blob and they're the cutest thing in the whole wide world. And you ask yourself, or you kind of think to yourself, I wonder who they are. Who are they going to become? What are they going to be in this world? Now, I think back to my early childhood and I asked, and I had one particular time, I had an aunt who had this incredible, this is probably early 60s, blonde beehive, she giant red lipstick, she was from California, and she, oh dearie, what are you going to be when you grow up? And it's like, I don't know, I was 10 years old. It's like, I don't know, I'm going to grow up and be something. But as time goes on, you're influenced as a human being, you're influenced by your parents and the paradigms that they grew up with, the people that are around you, then your teachers and your mentors. And through all of that and the stuff that happens to you, you come up with, who am I? This is who I am. Now, this changes obviously over time, but as you get older and older, that starts to solidify into who I am. So imagine this. Imagine what happens when something shakes that to the core. Okay. So as I grew up, one of the things that was absolutely critical to me was as I had concocted a vision of me as a pilot. Now, as I grew up, I knew I was born male. I looked male. I had three other brothers. We had a stepfather. He was very clear what male is and what male does. I was trained in being a man. I learned that when I like to call it, I went to dad school. I learned all the things that it takes to be a man. And by the time I was 30, I had crafted a clear vision of who I wanted to be. And at 30, 31, I was that vision. Now, I like to say this. At 31, I was a tall, white, college-educated military officer and elite pilot in the United States Air Force. I was kind of a tall version of Tom Cruise. Flying kind of a different airplane. But that's how I imagined myself. That is how I saw myself. That's who I represented myself to other people. That was the paradigm that I had built. Now, amongst all of that that's going on in my head and in my outer world, there's this small piece over here that says that's not really who you are. It's like, yeah, whatever, get out of here. I've made this up and this is who I am. That all worked until a very fateful day. And this is kind of an interesting, I think this is an interesting piece of my story. So imagine, if you will, I'm this tall, white, college-educated military officer. I've been stationed on the island of Guam, flying my B-52. Because I'm there alone, at the time I was married, and in this particular piece, you have to understand, I married a college sweetheart. We suffered all the way through pilot training as a military family. Sadly, a lot of what had happened in that marriage was due to the military. We were gone. I was gone a lot, all the time. And it was challenging. We had two sons, and as I neared age 30, 29, I guess, we got divorced. So now I'm divorced. I came from a divorced family, and it was really, 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 really important that I never, ever get divorced. So I really felt like a complete failure Then I meet the absolute soulmate, my love of my life. I mean, it was beyond magnetic. We were attracted to each other like nobody. She was in the military, I was in the military. We ended up getting married, but she ended up in Okinawa and I ended up down in Guam. So here I am, newly married, feeling like a failure that I'd lost that marriage, but happy as a clam that I found somebody I absolutely loved. I'm sitting in what's a bachelor officer's quarters. It's a small apartment on a military base. They're very, think of it more like a Motel 6 room. It's very basic apartment. I'm sitting there and I happen to have a computer. I was really loving computers. I had my Apple II Plus computer with 256K total RAM memory. I watched probably 10 times that. Connected to the internet. I had just learned, I had connected to, some of you are old enough to remember AOL and CompuServe. CompuServe had this new thing called a chat room. And you could go into a chat room, you type in a fake name and alias, and you could enter into the chat room as that person, and you could watch all these conversations. And I thought, this is the greatest thing on earth. I'm halfway around the world and I'm watching people talking. So I'm in this chat room, and there, in those days, there was kind of a lobby. Everybody kind of started in the lobby, and then if you wanted to talk to somebody privately, you could go to somewhere else. So I'm watching all of this happen when all of a sudden I see la 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 gender. And it's like, gender. What's gender? These two guys, apparently guys, are talking, and they decide to go over to room 13. And I have no idea, divine guidance, but I said, ooh, that sounds like really interesting. I went over to room 13. Now I was lurking in room 13. So that means that at that time, if I didn't type on my computer, they had no idea I was there. So I'm watching these two guys talking about this thing called gender. And as they start talking, they're talking about being guys, but feeling inside like they're women. Now, a couple things. One is this is an anonymous. They're anonymous. So they're having not only just a discussion, but I mean a real heartfelt pouring out of everything that they felt, because they had never met another person that had felt this way. So they had found each other, and it was just like, oh, really? You feel this way? Or you really feel that way? You feel it? And I'm over here going, what are they talking about? At first, it sounded like a Jerry Springer event. It's like, oh my God, these guys are crazy. I've never heard anything as crazy as this. But I'll tell you, one of the things that happened is that as I'm listening to this, in my mind, I'm thinking, I have always felt different than the men I've been around, but I had no way to understand what that meant. But when they started talking about feeling like a woman, it was the puzzle pieces that came together. It was the lightning that struck me. Bam. It was totally clear. As I'm listening, as I'm watching this happen, absolutely clear I'm one of them. That explains everything that I have felt for the last 30 years. It's all of a sudden it was the puzzle piece that just put the picture together. And I had two feelings. One, immense relief that I had finally figured out why do I feel so different? That was relief. The other, incredible fear. Because holy smokes, tall white guy, college educated, leader of men is feeling this way. It's like, no. That can't be true. But it was. So one of the things here, trusting your truth, it was absolutely clear after this conversation ended, and I stayed in until they ended. They went away. I sat back and now imagine I'm by myself on the island of Guam. I'm newly married. Together we have 3 kids. We have the perfect. This is honestly prince and princess married together, perfect in everybody's mind. This was and is the perfect marriage. And I'm thinking, holy smokes, with what I know at this instant, I'm about to trash everything that happened in my life up to this point. I'm going to lose my kids. I'm going to lose my brand new wife. I'm going to lose my career. I'll never fly again. Everything that I had built for 30 years, everything I knew in my life for 30 years was now flipped over. And I'm sitting by myself in the room going, what the hell do I do now? What do I do? One of the things I wrote recently is you can't unknow knowledge. All of a sudden it's in my head, and I think everybody in any way, if this happened to you, and as I'm saying this, I want you to think back in your life where all of a sudden you realize that's not who I am. People say, well, you're such a comic. Well, that's not who I am. You're such a leader. That's not who I am. Somewhere, somehow, some way, internally, you have a mental truth of who you are. And when I heard this, I knew instantly that was my truth. Now, what does one do with the truth? That's where it gets scary, because imagine again, I'm halfway through a military career. I'm brand new married. I've got 3 kids. If I tell this to anybody, I figure that's it. So, like anybody, the first thing I did is I did a little research, and I realized the internet was just opening up. This was the age where you could go to bulletin boards, which were people's hard drives. You could go to other person's computers and meet with a couple other people and talk about stuff. So I found some gender groups. I talked to some people, and I realized, yes, this is, I get it. It's the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life, but it is my truth what to do. Now, unlike most, if I've made some choices in life that have been really good, one of the very best choices that I ever made right away was I called Annie. I said, I learned some interesting things the other day, honey. I was with these guys in a chat room, and it turns out that they use this new term called transgender. I have never heard of the term transgender, but I will tell you this: it really struck a chord with me, and I think that's part of who I am. Now, I knew I knew making that phone call that was, on one hand, really a risky idea. But on the other hand, I knew Annie. And she and I for us to get together in the military was incredibly hard. And at the time when I very first met her, she was going through a divorce. Then I went through a divorce. All of that hugely, hugely painful. Then she gets sent to Okinawa, half a world away. I figure, okay, that's it. She's out of my life, but it's not. We keep a long distance relationship. And then next thing I know, we're getting married. And now we're married, only she's in Okinawa and I'm in Guam. We spent 2 years, our very first 2 years in that situation apart. We had not even lived with each other until 2 years of marriage. And in the midst of that, I call her up and say, hey, this transgender thing, I think that's who I am. Now, imagine, figuring out who you are. And we'll talk a little bit about how I found out who I am, and maybe how that might play into your life. But then what do you do with it? Now, for most people, and as I've been through this, and as I've held seminars and talked to other people, part of what I find is that there's so much power in the outer world of circumstance that's pushing you around until it pushes you to a place where they think you belong.
Ooh.
You know, your parents say, well, you're going to be a great accountant. You know, dad was an accountant. You're going to be a great accountant. Watching The Crown right now on, on Netflix. You're going to be king someday. It's like, okay, that's who you are. And so somewhere in life, you have to decide, am I going to follow that? Am I going to be pushed to where I want to, where they want me to be, or am I somehow going to integrate part of my truth, or in my case, I'm going to liberate my whole truth. I'm going to go on the adventure. We're not going to go halfway. We're gonna do it all. So in the end, as you can see on the video, in the end, Annie and I made a transition. And I say Annie, I, my kids, our whole family made a transition. All because I wanted to be the authentic me. So in the end, the question comes up, was it worth it? I have to say overwhelmingly, overwhelmingly worth every piece of it. I can't think of anything more important in the short period of time that you get on this time space continuum than to try to figure out who am I and be that. I love the human, for my whole life, and there's a whole nother show. For my whole life, I was a human doing. And ever since I met Mary and Judy, I've been working towards being a human being. I'm being me. So,
I just want to appreciate you and your honesty. And it was 1 year ago that you and Annie and I and a couple other people, we were at a pizza place in Hollywood. Remember that?
Hollywood.
And you and Annie were starting an adventure of writing a book or a movie. Can you tell us? And it was on love, I think. So just tell us a little bit about where that is then, and then I want to ask you one more question to wrap this up. But tell us more.
They absolutely. One of the things that has happened to us is that, and understand. Let me put a little time zone in on this. When I was in that chat room, I was 31 years old. Annie and I were halfway through a military career, and it was our secret for almost 10 years. Only she and I knew our secret. And we spent that time researching and doing other stuff. But in the military, where many of you have heard of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, we were even before that. We were in the don't tell, hell no, don't tell no one nothing, or you lose your career. So we knew that we couldn't share that with anybody. So we didn't share with kids or friends or family or anything. It was our deepest, darkest secret. But in the process, we were together trying to figure out, well, what would that mean? What would I do? How would that, there's a million questions. How does a man and a woman, then all of a sudden we're two lesbians? I mean, there's a whole to do about who am I? And I realized that as I'm becoming my authentic self, she's becoming her authentic self as well. All of that led to us to the idea of writing a book. And so we're in the midst of writing, in fact, we've written the book. The book is called Loving Without Limits. This came up recently in a conversation, and I hadn't really thought about it. But in so many regards, Annie and I represent traditional marriage to its ultimate, right? Because everybody makes the vow till death do us part, sickness and health, till death do us part, whatever, we're going to do this together. And I often laugh because for most marriages, that means I'm with you until you get transferred to Chicago. Then hell no, I'm not going there. The marriage is over. That's beyond what I ever signed up for. So in so many regards, Annie and I struggled through some of the biggest challenges that a marriage could handle. So in that sense, so we are writing our story, wrote our story, and it's called Loving Without Limits. We're in the phase where we're finishing the edit and looking for publishers. So if you guys know publishers, send us our way. And then that also we're in the process of doing a documentary on that.
This is so good.
Put
So
all this together in a video format. So that's where all of that is.
amen. And I just love it. I love it. So let's do this. Let's do this. One more question, and then I'm gonna do my magic here. First of all, what I like to ask is like all the people who are in paradigm shifters, what we like to do is to give you a gift, Laura, and a gift of asking you, what would you love us as a community to hold for you? What would you
Ooh.
love to have us hold for you personally, Laura? For one, for being just jumping on here and letting it out, and two, being your authentic, new, trusting your truth. What would you love us to have you hold for this time in your life? What would you love?
Well, I would love you to hold the vision that our story opens a crack in a population of people who are narrowly focused. We would like our story to open that crack, to allow them to see that diversity and difference, whether that's color, gender, sexual preference, however that occurs to people, that I am me and you are different. I would like people to realize that there really is no difference. There is only one human race. There's no race. We're not different races. We're all one human race, and we are all one unified. And I think if you can hold that this story brings more unity, then I think we are heading in the right direction. How's that?
Oh, yeah. Ready? Okay, everybody. Okay, we're gonna shoot this out to Palm Springs. This is around you. And so it is. And so we let it be. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on and opening up and this discussion and just bam, right? Bam.
Bam. I'm happy to share. And again, I do think that the more people that understand, uh,
Yes. And so what we're gonna tell you next week, we'll same time, same place. And for this time, Laura, thank you so much. And see you on the
thank
flip
you
side.
all for holding that.